Hi guys, welcome to the Inner Circle. I'm your host Scrivo. As you can see, we're back once again for another episode about a detachment. This time we're going to start looking at the Inner Circle Task Force. I'm going to break down what it does and then give you an example list that I've cooked together. Obviously it won't be the perfect list, but it kind of uses a couple of its tricks and kind of gives you a feel for probably a good starting point at least. Right, so what does this detachment give you? So the ability is called Vowed Target. So at the start of your movement phase, you pick whether to be in a defensive footing or in aggressive push. If you go for a defensive footing, you select one objective marker you control until the start of your next movement phase. That is your vowed objective. And if you go for the aggressive push, in kind of contrast to that, you select one or more objective markers you don't control. They become your vowed objective. So you can, in this situation, have multiple vowed objectives. Pretty cool if you're, say, going second and your opponent's sat on 2 or 3 objectives already. Gives you a lot of choice. There's some kind of target-rich environments around those objectives. Maybe not so helpful if they're not on objectives. But and then basically each time a Deathwing infantry unit from your army makes an attack that targets a unit within range of one or more of your vowed objective markers, you add 1 to the wound roll. So the condition to this is, yes, Deathwing can include Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders and Repulsors, but they don't benefit from this rule. A unit becomes Deathwing either by being one of the units of veterans or specific Darkangels units that are already veterans as well that are Deathwing, so Deathwing Knights, the named characters essentially, and then any units that are led by them would become a Deathwing unit as well. So the challenge with this is obviously a lot of the toolkit triggers off of being Deathwing. If a character isn't already Deathwing, some of the enhancements don't work with them, for example, and some of the stratagems are either Deathwing or Deathwing infantry specific. So as we go through that, you'll see there's some challenges to it. I think it's an exciting toolkit still, but it can be played around a little bit, which means that you've got to make the most of what you're actually achieving out of your army, and whether maybe a different playstyle suits you better. But if you wanted to just try it just because it's fun, why not, right? Right, so as I've just said, so it's ideal if you've got, say, if you're, so it's +1 to wound on a target on the vowed objective. So this is ideal in 2 situations. If you're a unit that's charging onto that objective and you're hitting them, so say you're going into something like a knight that's holding an objective and you're hitting them with something that's going to struggle, or in the case of this, probably not actually as impactful. So Deathwing Knights, if they're swords maybe, but if it's the maces and they're anti-monster, anti-vehicle 4-up, probably not so useful for them now, which is a shame. Or if it's a unit led by a character, so a Deathwing character such as Azrael with Hellblasters or something like Sternguard. The Sternguard themselves are veterans, so they would actually get it anyway, but it is sometimes useful to have something like Azrael led by leading Sternguard, because obviously he gives them sustained 1. Right, so the enhancements, right, so the first one is Champion of the Deathwing. For 15 points, it's a Deathwing model only. Melee weapons equipped by the bearer have lethal hits as an ability, and then each time they make a melee attack within range of your vowed objective marker, they get lethal hits on 5s. It's good. There's a handful of models that you can actually use it on, so it's all the Deathwing characters are basically Terminators or Blade Guard characters, I think. So it's cool. I don't love it. So to me, I quite often, if I've used it, I would slap it on something like, if I was looking at squeezing in, if I had some spare points, I think the other enhancements might favour it, but I had put it on things like a Deathwing Ancient, but even then, yeah, having a Thunderhammer that's got lethals isn't so great because you want it to be doing the dev wounds. So it was just, I'm not sure. This is one I feel like it's one that if you're going to not take all 4 enhancements, this is the one that you don't take. Right, and then I have the Unseen. So for 10 points, Deathwing model only. Each time your target of the bearer unit with the stratagem, you roll a d6, adding 1 if they're within range of your vowed objective. On a 5-up, you gain a CP. So obviously on a 4-up, you gain a CP if they're on your vowed objective. It's cool, but as we've seen with most Darkangel armies these days, at least for this edition, Azrael's normally a mainstay in your army. Anything that then gives you extra CP isn't so useful unless he's dead. So I don't think I've ever written a list with this in, unfortunately, which is a shame. That said, if you're playing a list where you desperately don't want to take Azrael just because you want to be a bit more efficient on your points, maybe. I don't know. Right, and then Singular Welt. This is the one that I love. So it's Deathwing model only for 20 points. Each time the Bearer's unit piles in or consolidates, models in that unit can move an additional 3 inches. So I like this for multiple units. So I love the idea of Deathwing Knights being led by something like an Ancient or a Captain. Getting that 6-inch consolidate and pile in is really nice. Or even a character leading Blade Guard. Unfortunately, there isn't an easy way to get it onto an Inner Circle Companions unit because all of the foot Deathwing characters that aren't named characters are actually quite limited. And that's the downside to this detachment, I found. It's like it's actually sometimes quite hard to make things synergize as well as you'd like. But that's what I do love, especially if it's leading on a Terminator unit, especially for that kind of that pressure of these guys are slow. Suddenly if they get an extra 6-inch movement on the consolidate and the pile-in, that's a lot of distance they can travel around and get out of dodge, or if they need to just reposition after they've destroyed something, or just looping around something. It's really, really handy. And then finally, Deathwing Assault. This is the one that is expensive. It's 30 points, and it is a Deathwing model with the Deep Strike ability only. The Bearer's unit can be set up using the Deep Strike ability from the first, second, or third movement phase. So this is interesting because you can then choose to have a turn 1 Deep Strike. I've used it quite aggressively before. I think that there is a place for it, especially you could even just take a single Deathwing character with it and basically just have a little guy that just drops in and goes, right, I'm here now, just to do mission stuff. Probably a bit expensive, but I still like that there's a choice there, and it's something a bit different, and it's often could feel a bit kind of like, oh, here you go, Deathwing Knights, turn 1, boom. But in reality, I think you'd probably weigh in more to have them rapid ingress still, personally, but still a cool trick to have. Right, so straight on to stratagems. As you can see, we've got Armor Contempt as the first one. This is the revised version, so it is when in the shooting phase or the fight phase, one unit from your army, when they are targeted by an attacker, until that attack has been resolved for that unit, worsen the armor penetration by 1. Obviously, this used to be just for the phase. It's cool. It's great. I think this is more of it's going to be very situational rather than just kind of smashing that button going, right, I need to spend my CP on it. It's not always going to be worth it, I don't think. And then we've got Martial Mastery, which is a CP in the fight phase, and it is one Deathwing infantry unit from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Until the end of the phase, they can reroll wound rolls of 1. And if the unit itself is within range of your vowed objective, reroll wound rolls instead. So this is really handy if you're taking something like this is the one that I really liked with Deathwing Terminator's Assault ones with Thunder Hammers. So you're trying to fish for those dev wounds, and you know that you're smashing into something on that objective. For a CP, giving them full rerolls to wound is pretty spicy. Obviously, you could do this on things like the Deathwing Knights as well. I just get more excited when there's something at the end if you're trying to fish those 6s. But even then, just making sure that all those 4-ups into a tank or something happens, great. So I think it's a really nice strat. I feel like this is the one that you're going to use most turns, that there's a go, like if there is actually any fights, that's what you're going to be using. And then we've got Duty UntoDeath. This is in the fight phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. So this is one Deathwing unit that has been selected as the target of those attacks. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in that unit is destroyed, it's a 4-up fight on death. So basically, you don't remove the models, they stay there, you mark that they're the ones that are destroyed, and then they fight once your opponent has already fought. This does trigger on a 3-up if you are within range of your vowed objective. Again, this is you're within range of it. So this is quite pivotal that sometimes someone could be like, right, I'm going to go next to that objective. And it could be like, oh, great, I don't get to trigger my plus to wound. But some of the stuff is based on you being on the objective. So there is some play that you don't always have your opponent playing around, which is kind of nice, I suppose. It's one of the most consistent fight on deaths that is a single CP, I think. Most of them are at least a 4-up or a 5-up, but it's very situational, of course. So, Right, and then we've got Reort Teleportarium. This is one of my favourite strats in the Codex. This is in your movement phase, so no rapid ingressing. This is one Deathwing unit arriving from Deep Strike. They can drop in 6 inches away instead of 9. Obviously, before the balanced data slate, this was a 3-inch Deep Strike, and then you couldn't charge. Let me just double check how they've worded this now. Yes, so you still cannot charge, but I don't mind that. Like, what I like the idea of this being is it's an aggressive kind of precursor of what you're going to do next turn. Put them an inch away from a wall, sit there and go, yep, I'm quite safe here. You can't cut angles at where these guys are. They're close enough that their next turn I move forward 5 inches with these Terminators and then do a little charge, and I get where I need to be. And I think that can be a problem for people. I don't think you can always use it. I think the threat of it is probably more dangerous than actually using it in actual practice, but we'll see. I haven't used it enough to really feel like I'd always want to use it, so, but we'll see. And then we've got Wrath of the Lion. This is in your charge phase. This is one Deathwing infantry unit that has just completed a charge move. You select one enemy unit with an engagement range, and then you roll a dice, a d6, per model in your unit, each 4 up. 3 up if that enemy unit is on your Vowed objective. So there again, it's switched. It's now if they're on the objective. That enemy suffers a mortal wound. So this is capped at 3. So it's cool. Don't get me wrong. If they're a real problem unit and you've worked out the maths that you may need a couple of extra wounds going through first, I can see it being useful. For a lot of the Deathwing Terminator stuff, they don't really have access to grenades, so it's a way of sneaking in some cheeky mortal wounds. Maybe if there's someone that's already injured type of thing. I don't know. It's one of those that when I've played the detachment, I've very rarely thought, I've got a CP spare, I'll use that. I would rather find a way to use non-Deathwing units throwing a grenade, which is a shame, but we'll see. Maybe you guys in the watching Mac, have you found you've used this a lot more than I have? Maybe I'm just not using it right. But yeah, that's basically what that one does. I think it's neat, but capped at 3 just feels a bit a shame, really. Like, it's a CP for 3 mortal wounds at best. And that requires you to at least roll the 3 as well. And you could just whiff it and be like, right, I've got 1. But I suppose you get that grenade where you roll 6 dice, and then you go, oh no, I have rolled the nothing. Never mind. But it's what it is. Right. And then finally, we've got Unmatched Fortitude. This is in your opponent's shooting phase after selecting its targets. One Deathwing infantry unit that was selected as a target until the end of the phase. Let me just check this one. Have I done that? Yeah, it is Deathwing unit. Cool. Deathwing infantry unit that was selected as a target until the end of the phase. Each time an attack targets that unit, if the strength is greater than your toughness, subtract 1 from the wound roll. So if I had only a CP left to spend, I think I would prefer to put this on a unit than the revised Armour of Contempt. So if situationally their strength was greater than my toughness, making yourself -1 to wound, really, really useful. Especially if that's a unit that you just need them to survive. If this is their last unit shooting, and it's the matter of you having that unit on an objective to score you some primary, I feel that's one that you're going to play. And I think it's neat as part of the toolkit. Right, so here is the list I have written. So I've named it, I bought a Christmas box and I'm not using it. Because despite the Christmas box being called Inner Circle Task Force, I don't feel you would use the box as it is in this detachment, which is a shame because silly things like you get a chaplain in Terminator armor in that box and he gives you +1 to wound. Obviously that's not on a Vowed objective. That's very helpful. But the Lion himself, tragically, does not synergize at all with this detachment. So as you can see, he's not here. So what I've done is I've tried to get as much in that is Deathwing and also keep in some scoring and a little bit of shooting, because yes, the shooting of the Deathwing units can be really good. You still want to have some actual firepower that you can rely on a little bit, kind of like long range. So this is why, as you'll see, we've got Azrael with some Hellblasters. So he's giving them sustained 1, 4 up in Van. They're now Deathwing infantry, so they get access to all that cool stuff. I find that's really kind of a nice little brick. It's kind of the classic brick. He could equally be with the Stern Guard, but I felt like because they're already Deathwing, keyword because they're veterans, they could get away with not having him. But obviously, depending on mission, depending on what targets you've got in the game, it might be more useful in the matchup to suddenly switch him into the Stone Guard. And I thought that was nice to give people that choice. Right, and then I've got a Blade Guard Ancient leading 6 Blade Guard Veterans. This is a bit different. I tend to not favour my Blade Guard as much as I probably should. The Ancient's quite cool because he does give everyone, like once per game, will give everyone +1 to hit, +1 attack, which is something you've got to respect, because something that's a lot of attacks on their swords. Their swords will really benefit from targeting something on the Vowed objective, because +1 to wound with their swords will make them go from hitting heavier targets to suddenly actually doing all right into them. I've given him the enhancement Singular Will, which is the +3 to your advanced Consolidate and Pile. I really like that on them because they're a nippy unit already, because the 6-inch move for Deathwing, a Deathwing unit, is actually quite unusual because all the Terminator guys are moving their little plod of 5 inches. And then I've got a captain in Terminator armor with Deathwing Assault, so they can drop in the Deathwing Knights more than 6 away. So if they're feeling screened out, this is where I think this is more interesting. It's not about an aggressive drop in 6 away, drop in early. This is giving them the choice. They can come in turn 1, be set up quite aggressive, especially if you're going first, and there is a pocket you can drop them. Because if your opponent then goes forward and blocks where they want to be, you then have to drop them down somewhere probably less favourable, and then it takes some time. So being able to get that kind of pressure early feels quite nice, especially if you're then trying to do it where you go, I'm going to stay in this kind of my side L that's kind of got some protection. You can't really shoot at me. They're just going to sit there. They're there on an objective going, this is ours now, and if you come to it, other stuff will get you. And I think that could be quite nasty. Then we got 10 Stone Guard Veterans. Since I last played this detachment, they've obviously been given a glow up that if they are targeting your Oath target, they get to reroll to wound. I really like this. So as long as they're used correctly, and obviously pairing them with Azrael can be really nice as well. But just generally, the fact they're a Deathwing unit just triggers some nice stuff. And the models are beautiful. And they do look great with hoods. And then I've put a Lieutenant with a combi weapon in, because having a lone op that can make you reroll 1s to wound on an objective, great, especially if you're going after things on objectives anyway. And also having just a guide to go, right, I'm going to go and do mission stuff in places whilst being a lone op. It's helpful. Obviously, if you really struggle with lone ops, this is the guy that I like to use in most of my armies, because he's just a little bit cheaper than a Calidus. Yes, he doesn't give you the vectability, but he gives you some of that toolkit. And then we've got a Librarian with the Inner Circle Companions. The Librarian doesn't give them Deathwing keyword, but they already are. So this is more about giving them the defensive 4-up invuln that the Librarian bestows on them. They obviously then can benefit from all the toolkit of being Deathwing anyway, but with some survivability. Then we've got 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts, because if they're targeting something that is not below half strength, they get to reroll to hit, which is very nice. So you're not having to rely on them shooting at your Oath targets. They're something that people have to respect a little bit. They are not as survivable as a Redemptor Dreadnought, but still for their points, they can sit there, cut angles, be a bit obnoxious, then move up, and then they can even hold objectives for you, because having their little OC kind of being more than 1 is actually kind of useful. Late game, I found sometimes I can be holding objectives with Dreadnoughts that people just have ignored because they've just thought they're not a threat. And then 2 squads of 5 jump pack intercessors. Again, mission play. These guys, even though they've gone up in points again and again and again, I still feel like fast moving infantry are always something you're going to want. There's cheap bodies, they can charge in, do some impact damage with the Hammer of Wrath ability, they've got access to grenades, there's 1 power fist in the unit if they've got the sergeant loaded out correctly. That just always creates problems for people. I think that's something that you always need to have in lists. And every time I've built a list that doesn't end up having them in, I always have to look at what I'm cutting out to put them back in. And then finally, 5 scouts. As much as I would love sometimes not to have to put them in, because some matchups there's going to be so many pressures that people will forward deploy themselves, push you out. You don't want to be boxed in, so having them to at least push and screen, even if it's just hiding in the middle, kind of the middle, just off the center, just protecting people just coming in and just being aggressive. You need that respect. when we saw before Votann got their Jaegers, they really struggled with this sort of thing of like pressure, especially pressure melee lists just throwing into them. Obviously we can handle it a bit better, but you still don't want to be in that situation. So that's very much, that's how I'm vibing for them. It's not the most exciting of lists, I'm not going to lie. You could swap out the Ballistus Dreadnoughts for a tank or two, maybe some cheap stuff like that, but I wanted to try to utilise all the cool stuff, like having the Deathwing Assault and Singular Will does eat up the points. Then plus the Lieutenant is basically a whole squad or something you could throw in, so there is often ways you can work around it. I would like to try a list where it doesn't feature Hellblasters and Azrael, but has more Sternguard instead. But yeah, guys, let me know in the chat what you think you would take if you were going to build a Inner Circle task force after Christmas. Until next time, guys, what are we going to do next? So the next video is going to be about the First Legion in other systems. So as you guys know, I play quite a lot of Kill Team. I've just started dipping my toes into Legions Imperialis as well. I was always a bit kind of, I'm not sure I want to do it because it's just Space Marines. But then I went, it's just Space Marines. So this is an opportunity where I really like the idea of exploring what it's like to play Heresy, but without having to build a large 28mm scale Heresy army. So this is a way that I can kind of field a bunch of tanks and not feel bad that I've got tons of this stuff. And I'm obviously going to show you Kill Team, because in the coming weeks I'm going to a Warhammer World event and I'm taking a Darkangels Angels of Death Kill Team with me, and so I'm going to get lots of photos and I'll do a bit of a review about that as well, which I think should be kind of cool, right? And then let me know in the comments below. Darkangels 101, the next video will be about another detachment, but which one would you like me to do next? Obviously I've only just covered the updates to Company of Hunters, but if you want me to cover that, or if you'd like me to cover even one of the vanilla ones, but through the lens of Darkangels, let me know. And the most votes, or the one that gets my attention, I'll probably do. So thank you guys for tuning in. Obviously this is the first of many for this year. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. Let me know in the comments any feedback you got. I always want to try to improve these videos as best as I can, and hopefully moving forward we can have more of these videos about Darkangels. Until next time,